show, but she jumped up here, and I'm like, you are not going to be on the show.
You don't get. There's only one diva in this household.
Hello, learn it, know it. Okay, we are live. Hey, everybody. Welcome and happy Thursday. Happy Thursday. I'm so happy that you all are coming on into the room, as we say. Come on in the room. Come on in the room. I wonder how everybody's doing today. I hope well. Today, it wasn't quite Zoom hell today, but there were a couple calls and always drama. What is life without drama? How was your day, Matthew?
Just great. Just great. Busy also. Mostly Zoom hell, but Zoom and phone hell. But that's what we have to deal with today. So that's how it's going to work for a while.
That's what it is. Thank you, Corona. Coronita. All right, I just posted it to my page. Hey, Michael Priestley. Hey, Matt. How are you, darling? Yes. Should I share this to your page? I don't know if I can share this to your page, Matthew.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't think
requires anything technologically. Probably not.
Right. Because the crazies are in the house always. Yes. Good evening. Good evening. Hi, Ken. Kenny Overton said hello, Matthew Warner. Love. Yes. It was raining here like crazy. And I was hoping that our internet didn't go out. My internet didn't go out. And it didn't. Anyway, Matthew, welcome to Kiki Conversations.
Thank you. As I told you on the phone, I'm both surprised and honored to be here. So,
thank you. I know you are a part of the Convos crew, low key. So
that's absolutely. As a listener, I've been a pretty loyal listener. So
I appreciate
learning
the
a lot.
Thank you. I appreciate the love. You and I go way back. Please tell the people.
Indeed, you were a teenager, actually. I think you had just won the Rose Upon Self competition, correct?
Yeah.
I think you were about 18, if I'm getting it right. And I heard you in an audition in Cami Hall, which I think was arranged by those people, and I heard with my Cami Hall and my then Cami colleagues. And we chatted after that already, and I think you sang Despre Siciliani, as I remember. And I can't remember what else at the time, but Despre Siciliani still stuck with me, so.
18 and inappropriate, right? 18 and inappropriate. But you know what? I wish I had some of that naivete and that kind of like, I'll just go out and do it.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely. But yes, and I think we've known each other ever since.
And we...
Our business and...
Absolutely. And we have been trying to have a...
Exactly. Yes.
For a while. So cheers.
Cheers. Next time in Philadelphia or New York in person.
In person, absolutely. Social distancing.
Yes, exactly. Always.
All the time. All the time.
And I got hand sanitizer, which every singer already had anyway. So.
Right. That's what I said. I was like, I always had Clorox wipes in my bag.
Exactly. I always carried hand sanitizer as much for people that I was around as for myself.
Absolutely. So Matthew, talk to us a little bit about your background. How you
Sure.
Came to the industry.
Sure. I'll start even earlier just because I think it's a bit relevant. I'm a fellow Pennsylvanian. I'm from Western Pennsylvania, from Johnstown, which is mostly famous for its floods. I started playing violin at 10 and was around music all my life. Since then, but I don't hold a degree in music. I played violin for 13 years and started singing in choirs in high school, but that's the extent of it. And I never thought that I would be a performer. I never was, and didn't have that talent, so it really wasn't a question. But I had a real love of classical music from playing the violin, and was mildly obsessed, as I tend to be with whatever I'm concentrated on. And I was listening to various records we had out of the library, and my mother had a record of duets from Norman Seminamide. And I had been to two operas, they were Barbieri and Fledermaus. I thought they were both kind of stupid. And I really think, I was much more a snotty kid who wanted to listen to chamber music and symphonic music. And I listened to that record, and I had my St. Paul on the Road to Damascus moment, and was completely gobsmacked and absolutely amazed by what, of course, it was Dame Joan Sutherland and Marilyn Horne. And I was just absolutely gobsmacked. And I really think from that moment on, I became an opera fanatic at about, I don't know, I was about 15 or 16.
Wow.
And I've been obsessed with it ever since. However, that I never thought was anything but a hobby. I had no idea that would ever translate itself into a profession. I had many other ideas of what I was going to study and everything else. So I went to Oberlin College, not conservatory, but I spent a lot of time in the conservatory, but was not part of it other than mildly, and was around a lot of music there as well, and then studied what I've studied all along is the history of art. And so I have my undergrad and master's in the forever unfinished PhD in the history of art. And that was what I thought I would do. And I had expected to be a professor. And that was that. And opera opera and singing were hobbies. And I got to New York to go to grad school at the Institute of Fine Arts at NYU. And was going to the Met and Carnegie and Tully and every place madly, obsessively. And was getting autographs at the stage door. And I'd met Marilyn Horne in March of '91, and she, I expected she would, sign my program and say goodbye. Well, it was a cold day. She wanted us to come to her dressing room, so of course I went, oh my God, the dressing room at Carnegie Hall,
Yes.
I got to meet her and this person who had already been seminal for me because of that first record, and I expected, just hi, thanks, bye, and we started chatting and we hit it off, and ended up chatting for 20 or 25 minutes. And she said, I told her I was moving to the city, and she said, oh, I'm doing this new opera at the Met next year. Please write me a note and remind me where we met. And she said, I'll remember you because we're both Western Pennsylvanians and because we have similar surnames. And so I wrote her and went to every single performance of Ghost of Versailles. So she did Falstaff, which is on, actually both Ghost and Falstaff are on DVD. And went to every single performance of Falstaff that season also. And after performance number 6, and after she had given, had her driver drive me home and was kind as a human being could be, she said, you really want to work in this business, don't you? And I said, oh, no, I'm a professor. But, and in her very Marilyn Horne, well, when you change your mind, here's my home number. Call me.
Oh, no.
Not when.
When. Okay.
Carl
Kettleson said, get closer to your microphone.
Get closer to my, okay.
Yeah.
Not enough you phone. Sorry.
Use your opera voice.
Not projecting, obviously.
Exactly.
But that was, and she was the one who introduced me to my first boss and to various managers at Columbia Artists, where I started my career. And she introduced me to somebody I had known already, but who became my first mentor and my great mentor, Matthew Epstein. And so she was the one who really set that up. And in fact, I met several Cami managers, and I wasn't really clicking with them, to be honest with you, since we'll talk about Cami somewhere in this conversation.
Right.
And I really wasn't clicking with them. I was told by one of them that they didn't need an opera queen in their division.
We take a drink on that one.
Right. That deserves a sip for sure. Another one said that they didn't need somebody going weak in the knees when a particular star soprano called. And fine, again, I thought, and I said to her, oh, I think this isn't for me. And she said, oh, I know who you have to talk to. And so Matthew and I lived in the same building at the time, and so I walked down one floor to see him and spent, I think, about 4 hours with him, and we got on. I then went to Columbia Artists for a 3-month trial period in 1995, got fired, and Matthew, to his immense credit, and incredibly generously brought me back in '96, which is what I consider to be the start of my career. I was there until 2000, and I've been at IMG for the last 20 years.
Wow.
And it's the only thing I ever did in the music world, by the way. I've only ever been in management. I never worked in a box office. I didn't intern. I didn't do anything else. I didn't, and it was something that was decided for me. I didn't seek it out. I didn't research it. I was a horrible example of how to approach a professional relationship. I just was in love with the material, you know.
And it's interesting that an agency can say, "Well, we don't need an opera queen." When that's the job. The job is
It's certainly a big part of it. I mean,
yeah.
the passion is what's governed most of the people that I know that have come to the profession, and the ones who want to stick it out, the ones who want to frankly have the entry level salaries in the profession, which I'll say publicly are abysmal. You know, it was not enough to survive on, and it's barely enough to survive on now. And if any of my colleagues are on tonight, it's, you know, it's not for the love of money that one does it, which is, I know, really is counter to a stereotype about managers.
Yes.
But
I was about to say that people think that this lifestyle is so glamorous, but it costs money to be glamorous.
You know, no diva doesn't know that, you know. But Dolly Parton said, you know, it costs a lot of money to look good. That's
Of course.
But no, it was. It is there is an element to it that of course is wonderful and that is, I guess, glamorous. I don't know. It's never what the word I would use, but I think other people think of it that way. But you need more than anything else. It's about a passion, and as it is for all of you as artists, as it is for I think anybody that's involved in this endeavor. You know, that's what your starting point is. It's not about just making money or anything of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I mean, that I'm glad we're talking about that because, there is this whole career transitions, people figuring out what they want to do, the whole idea of, why there aren't more agents of color, particularly Black agents. And we've had that conversation, most recently. And to talk about, oh, there's not really money in it and you have to do it for the love, but also, there's not a lot of diversity. So talk about that.
Almost none, at least in my time. We did have one very distinguished African American person at IMG briefly, and he went on, of course, to the San Francisco Symphony and Cleveland Orchestra, Mark Williams, who's had a wonderfully distinguished career.
Yes.
And was a terrific young manager, too. But no, there hasn't been any, and this is something, I think this is one of the major building blocks of what needs to happen now. And this is something where if there is something I can do, I will certainly give it my utmost effort, because I've always been very proud of the fact that I was mentored by great bosses, both Matthew Epstein and Alec Troyhoff, and that I hope that I am a mentor to others. And that's something I take enormous pride in. I always thought I was going to teach something, and instead I didn't. But in the end, I really feel passionately about being a mentor and bringing people into the profession, because we need this profession, and we will still need managers going into the future. And you cannot possibly, representation like anything else. Representation, again, the word is intrinsic to every discussion that's been going on in these last months, and it's absolutely critical that we have, of course, African Americans and people of color in this profession, and we need them. And I am here to say I would love to hire somebody. Now, of course, we have this little itsy pandemic to deal with at the moment, but let us hope that at some point that will abate, and we'll be able to at least resume some semblance of what our business has been.
Absolutely. I mean, do you think the industry is prepared? Although they have to be. I keep saying to people, if you're not ready, you better get ready. But like, how does one how does one develop the skill set, and what is the actual skill set of representing artists?
Right. Well, I think first of all, I mean, for me, and there are many colleagues I think that may have a differing view of this, but for me, first and foremost, and absolutely the sine qua non for me, is knowing what you're talking about. It's knowing repertoire, it's knowing music, it's knowing for us in this particular conversation, the voice, and knowing, and of course, then knowing all of the people that are in the profession, the singers, the presenting organizations, the recital presenters, the concert presenters. You have to have connections. I always say the two things I have are advice and connections. And that's the most important thing that one can have. For me, it's the knowledge. Now, obviously, one has to have at least some business acumen. Now, I don't certainly have an MBA, and none of my colleagues do, at least at the present moment. Some in our field do, and that's wonderful. Some are attorneys. That's wonderful too. It's by no means a necessity, because I think that what you need to learn as far as that portion of the profession can be learned on the job. And simply by, by reading contracts and learning how to scrutinize contracts and that sort of thing, learning how to negotiate a fee and the context of that, because again, that's something that's learnable. Whereas for me, learning repertoire, learning about voices, learning about all the artistic element is a lifetime of study. And that's, so those things, absolutely. The gift of the gab, you have to have personality. You have to be able to engage other people and somehow convince other people to, for lack of a less base way of putting it, buy what you're selling.
Yeah.
And convince people that your taste is not simply a subjective thing of your own, but something that's relevant to their theater. And that is something where you do have to be able to be persuasive. You have to be, I suppose, articulate. You have to be outgoing enough to do that. So that, for me, those things are all vital elements. Obviously, being trustworthy is rather helpful too.
A little bit, right?
I mean, for me, again, I know, one of the many stereotypes that's talked about with management all the time is that they're managers are shysters and dishonest and give terrible advice and so on. And of course, that is true of some. I don't think it's in any way true of a majority. And, I know most of the people at a certain place in the field, both in this country and in Europe, and I don't think that is the case. I think that there are mostly people who are passionate, who are knowledgeable, and okay, maybe they don't do everything right. God knows I don't. But it's one of those things that it's always sort of painted with a very broad brush. The same way you say lawyer, lawyer, and that's my father, my grandfather, my great grandfather, uncles, aunts, cousins. My family is all lawyers, so of course that was always a mildly offensive thing for me to hear. But and fill in the blank that's true of myriad professions. But in any case, those artistic knowledge, some sort of business acumen, persuasion, the gift of the gab, and the ability to have others believe what you believe. The ability, there is, for me, again, and others may differ in their view of this, I think there is a certain gravitas too, a certain, for lack of a better term, elegance and presentation and so on, that people aren't feeling like they're being beaten over the head all the time, because they're, again, contrary to popular belief, we don't just call up presenting organizations and scream at them all day. Because who's going to return your call when that happens?
Right.
Who's going to want to talk to you? Maybe they have to because you have artist X or Y, but largely they're not going to help. And frankly, we will all have to ask for a favor at some point.
Yeah.
And it's better to have cultivated a positive relationship than to have, browbeaten somebody into submission over $500 or 500 euros.
Right.
And then have them say, okay, well, that's too bad that artist so-and-so is sick and we'll never have them again. Bye.
Right, exactly.
Who does that serve in the end?
Nobody, because everyone's broke. Nobody makes money.
Kind of the case right now too, isn't it?
Yeah, well, this is true. Organizations not paying the money and people not getting their, fees, and you not getting the commissions, and, it's the whole thing. But, of course, everyone, all the artists, you have this dream of, being represented by the big agencies and, the big power managers. And there's the whole illusion that if you're not represented, in those big agencies, you don't become, you don't become a star, or you don't have the kind of a certain level of career. And, and talk a little bit about that, because some people feel like, well, I'm not at IMG, I'm not at Cami, so I don't have a career.
Well, I'd say nobody's at Cami now, unfortunately.
Well, oops. Yeah, this is true. This is true.
Which is, we'll get there. Anyway, but no, I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think that certainly, I think what we have, for me at an agency, what I have is very good information flow. I have a lot of colleagues, both in Europe and in the United States, and I adore my colleagues. I have a wonderful group of colleagues that I learn from every day, and I've always liked having colleagues. They give me a great deal of information. They give me challenges. They give me ideas. They give me all the things, all the stimuli that one could want in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And as such, that part is great. But so as far as that goes, we do know about a lot of things simply because we have a lot of people that we represent, and therefore, and at a certain level, we hope so that they're involved in certain projects, and therefore you know that a company is doing Bohème, and then you can say, oh, hey, do you have your Musetta, do you have your Chonard, whatever.
Right.
So that part, the information flow is great, but I think that the present moment is going to be a real shift, actually, from these larger agencies. Not tomorrow, I hope, although the example of Cami is a scary one for all of us because it happened very quickly and unexpectedly. And so, yeah, I don't know, but I have a suspicion that the paradigm is going to shift in these next years, probably away from larger agencies a bit and toward an old-fashioned sort of secretariat, a sort of manager and assistant kind of relationship. And those people will have a great deal of cachet because, again, they will have the relevant artists. And so it isn't really a question of being with us. It's a question of being with an individual. And if that individual is in his living room, or if that individual is in an agency of many, many managers that's multinational and everything else, it's the person with whom you work, and that person's trust, and of course their ability to deliver things to you. If you say, if and when your design is that you're in the dialogue that every artist should have with their manager, you have similar goals, and that the manager is then not able to deliver those goals, maybe for lack of connections, maybe for lack of rapport, whatever, then maybe you do have to reevaluate that. But that's not necessarily a big versus small dichotomy. It's much more about the person, and that person can have 5 artists, that person can have 50 artists.
Yes. I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that because I think that there's a lot of the myth of the agent. The myth of how you get an agent, the myth of how you get chosen. Do they choose you? Do you choose them?
The answer to that is both. It should be both because, again, it's a meeting. It's a partnership, a business partnership. And therefore, if one party, if I'm at your dressing room door pounding away telling you the greatest thing since the pop-up toaster, and you are like, and the person gives you the heebie-jeebies, that it's probably not a good idea, but it is a business partnership, and that partnership can take on many guises, and certain relationships with artists are very close, certain ones are more transactional and businesslike, and some probably aren't the people that you choose to be your best friends, but may deliver for you or them or vice versa. So
yeah, how do you choose an artist?
Instinct now, almost entirely. Earlier on, I certainly was more beholden to suggestions from colleagues and colleagues of all sorts, not just in-house colleagues, but people that I trusted and said, "This is someone for you." And I think that I probably listened to them more than necessarily I would now. I have, of course, as we all should, a group of people that I trust, and I know that when people come, recommendations come and so on, that I do that. But largely, it's what I hear. And for good or ill, and I really do mean that prepositional phrase, I trust my own ears, and I have an instinct that I have been wrong about and I've been right about. I've been right more than I've been wrong, thank God, because I'm still employed. But
well, you're still here, so clearly.
Still here, exactly. Cue Sondheim song. But at the same time, it's more instinct than anything else. What I'm looking for, however, is uniqueness. What I'm looking for is something that strikes me, and that can be expressive, that can be technical, that can be linguistic, that can be, obviously one hopes, an amalgam of all of those. But it's what strikes me about somebody, and that can be just extraordinary technical prowess. Someone sings so well that it at a certain level, probably will be employed, or the voice is of a particular size, or or what sells me a great deal is the expression, the depth of art, and the profundity of the artistry, and that is what. And in the end, it has to move me. It has to interest me. It has to spark something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've always been like that. That's the one thing that I do know about you, is that it has to move you.
Yeah, most definitely, and it does profoundly, by the way.
Yes.
And I will say too, it moves me also in a different fashion because I also am really, really privileged to have roster not only of great singers, great voices, great physical endowments of that sort, but also really smart people. And I really do tire of the stereotypes of singers of being not musicians and not as smart and everything else. As with every profession, it comes in varying degrees. But I am really lucky to have a lot of really bright people that I work with who are, and especially in a time where everybody's at home and cogitating a great deal more, I have brilliant artists who are loaded with ideas, ways to address so much of what's going on in the world right now, not just Book Me for Tosca and Bohème, but really profound, and not limited to opera either, in the concert realm, in the recital realm. And, that's, for me, that's the most engaging part of it, is those sorts of planning things, because the ideas, especially right now, especially when we don't know what the parameters are going to be even 6 months from now, the ideas are critical. The idea of just saying, I'm good, book me for Strauss-Lieder,
Right.
maybe a few people, but like 10. And thereafter, what are we all bringing to the equation that isn't just, I'm good, book me? That might have really worked even a few decades ago, but it's not going to necessarily be the way forward.
I agree. We're all artists are going to have to shift. And I oftentimes have this conversation. Well, I struggled a lot because I always saw myself as this singer. And then when I started my career, it was like, you got to be in a box. You got to sing this and you got to sing that. And I can't always say that I sang always the things that were the best for the kind of singer that I became. It was just what the industry needed or what people needed from me. Or whatever. And so, having the few people who understand that, who hired me to, to sing the things that I feel like I should sing, or, allowed me to be a recitalist and all this, and it's like knowing so much about who you are as an artist.
Thank you. Yes.
Is infinitely more important, I feel like, than anything.
So important. The more that you know what message you're putting out there and what you are bringing to the table that is uniquely you. The joy, the great joy of the singing voice is it is the most individual of instruments. It is in your body. It is literally intrinsic, and it is that signature, that fingerprint that is absolutely not like anyone else. And that is what the joy of the human voice is to me. That's the and I'm not saying that, of course, people, violinists, pianists, cellists can't be unique and different and all those things, but the human voice, most of them copy the human voice.
Yes.
Most of them want to have a cavalier legato or whatever, and that's always, the voice will always be an example, and that's the joy of it. So the more that you know what you're bringing to the table, as far as of course the sheer vocalism, as far as that, but as far as all the rest, the languages, are you interested in languages? Are you a person who really wants to read and project poetry? Because if you're not, you probably shouldn't do recitals.
Yeah.
You may be really famous and you may have a big name, but I've seen some big names sing some of the worst recitals I've ever seen. I've also seen some big names sing glorious recitals.
Yes, exactly.
Glorious, memorable recitals that will stick with me forever.
Yeah.
It's a question of temperament. It's a question of whether that suits you as an individual. If poetry and that sort of that micro scale appeals, then that's great. If it doesn't, it's okay. Leonie Rieseneck didn't sing recitals. There was a reason. That talent was like this. That was not this.
Right. Yes, exactly. And sometimes, and then you have somebody like Jessie Norman who was like this, and then she could always scale back, but that was a unique,
extraordinary,
being, in a way.
And I suppose, from the point of view of most managers, I think that's an ideal career, because it is well balanced among opera, concert, recital, and at that time, at least in Jessie Norman's time, the recordings, of which she made many, thank God. But as far as the balance, that's really critical, and it's also critical for your personal life. It's critical for your headspace. If you're just singing 50 or 60 performances of opera a year, and there's very little variance in the diet, that can be difficult. Now, again, certain voices aren't going to sing a lot of concert repertoire.
Right.
Probably.
Yeah.
Although, you know, an enormous voice like Hans Hotter sang glorious recitals. Jonas Kaufmann's is a wonderful recital.
Yes.
There are plenty of big voices. It's not just a big, small thing again, much like we were saying about agencies, you know. It's not just about vocal size, it's about temperament. It's about whether you want to convey words and work on that scale.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I wish that universities and conservatories really, you know, pushed the individuality, but that's a whole other conversation for a whole other day. That's part two. You know, but so
But
when,
I have to just take something really
absolutely.
what you said though, because especially for American singers, the idea of technical perfection, of course, technique is the bulwark. It is the bedrock. It is the you can't. The house won't stand. The ship won't float. Whatever one wants to say, you have to have it. It's not negotiable, and in that regard, it's a must. However, if one's only obsession is technical and creating perfection rather than creating expression, you may have a very limited career. Because especially right now, and not really just now, for decades really, European theaters especially are about expression and about the ability, you know, and about theater in a way that it's not that it isn't relevant in America, of course it is, but not in the same particular way. And this is something where American singers have been stymied, I think, a lot of times. And I hear from colleagues in Europe and from on judging panels and whatever, yeah, perfect, but very American, you know, and that's happening a lot because we do have the highest technical standard in the world here, and in many ways the very best teaching in the world. But it can also lead to a certain homogeneity that I think is really is becoming a problem for certain American singers. Individuality, digging deeper, finding meaning. This is so critical. I can't state this emphatically enough, especially if there are younger singers listening, that it's really, really important to find the expression as much as just singing lovely pearly tones in 3.5 octaves. That's great and necessary. Let me say it again. It's absolutely necessary. I've never been a fan of technically maladroit voices. I mean, who is? But at the same time, it's a means to an end rather than an end in itself.
Yes, absolutely. It is. And why would someone sit and listen to you sing for 90 minutes or 2 hours when they can just pop a recording at home, you know? And when I teach master classes, I always say you must learn how to lift those black notes off that white page and make it say something. And you must have something to say and have an opinion about everything you do. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong or indifferent or whatever. If you thought about it, you've done the work and you've thought about it, you must have something to say.
Amen. Absolutely. Absolutely. No. Especially in a forum like a recital, in which you do have a lot more authorship than in opera. Because in opera, you have to do what the theaters are doing. I mean, in a certain, yes, okay, very few artists may have a real dialogue with the theater, but that's a very privileged group and a small group. Whereas in a recital, if you're just regurgitating what you did on your senior recital in college, you're not giving a recital.
Not at all.
You're just walking through the paces. And that's boring. And recitals give you a certain amount of the ability to be your own artist and to program carefully and smartly. It's something I'm very fussed about because I really think that it's such an important opportunity, but one that's diminished so much that if you have the chance, you have to say something.
You do. You have to say something. You're required to say something. You know, so when this whole pandemic went down, and for me personally, I was like so busy. I had been at the Met and I had done 4 recitals, and literally the day before everything shut down, I was flying from a gig, and then the world shut down and everything was complete, a chaos. And what was that like for you when you're getting all these phone calls? Take a drink before you answer that.
Right. I actually have to take the whole bottle off before
that.
Yeah. It's miserable, and it's unlike anything any of us have encountered before. It's this sustained issue being a worldwide issue. Again, for instance, there were stoppages after, I remember after the September 11th bombings, for instance, there was a brief caesura, but it was, days.
Right.
This is already half a year and probably morphing into well more than that. So, it already is going to be more than that, let's be honest. And it's devastating. It's absolutely devastating because I see, whatever frustrations I may have, I see the frustrations of my clients who are so much wanting to express something.
Yes.
And to be in front, and also to have the reciprocal adulation that they deserve. And that is really tough. It's been very, very hard because most of my clients have been incredibly stoic, incredibly strong and focused and not lamenting and not engaging in a lot of that. But really, I know it's devastating and it's been miserable. I got to the point where I was, I knew I had to make 3 or 4 more calls to say this was canceled or that was canceled.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually you just, you hit a limit. I know I certainly hit a ceiling, and I think my colleagues the same. I'm sure many of my colleagues,
yes,
I know many of my colleagues feel this way. But, I will say I am a hopeless optimist, and I always have been. And I do see that there will be benefits from this. It will not all be benefits.
True.
But I do see, for instance, a much greater rapport and camaraderie among my managerial colleagues, both here and in Europe. A lot more dialogue about what is helpful to artists, I think. And I think that our ability to finally come together in a meaningful way, kind of for the first time, is really been extraordinary and very, very empowering at a moment where I think most of us feel like we don't have a lot that we can control. And so in that regard, I really do feel I'm happy about that. I think we will also have a moment of creativity. I think there will be a lot that is going to come out of this that will spark creativity and spark, because moments of trouble of whatever sort, and we have many of those troubles at the moment, do spark extraordinary artistic achievements. There's no doubt of that.
Yes.
Much documented throughout history. So, but no, it's of course it's been miserable. I mean, it's whatever disruption it is to my life or my lifestyle, so be it. But for the artists, I do feel it.
Oh yeah.
But
yeah, it's heartbreaking.
And frankly, the financial part, although that is incredibly relevant and so on, doesn't again begin to speak to the issue as much as the artistic part, the expression, the ability, that extraordinary thing of being in the same space. And living room concerts and all these things are not going to really be the same. They may fill a void, a temporary void, but they're not to have a 2-dimensional rendering of a 3-dimensional art is just never going to be the whole game. And any, whether you do an HD transmission, which is extraordinarily well done and expensive and everything else, it's still a 2-dimensional rendering of a 3-dimensional art. If you're not vibrating in the same space, it's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing. And that's why I said we have to get back to live theater. We must.
I'm heartened that Europe is making really major forays into doing this. I do wish that it were happening over here. It doesn't seem to be a whole lot. I mean, I will say that companies are showing some interesting innovation now, poco a poco, including taking certain productions that they'll create in a studio, or of course recitals as well, which we don't have enough of. So I suppose that's a good thing. And a company like Atlanta Opera, which is doing a whole new structural thing, which I think is fascinating, and could well be an interesting way to the future for some companies. I think that all those things. Again, I choose to at least find the lemonade from the lemons, which isn't to say I don't see that this is also going to have an enormous impact.
Yes,
we're not just going to, for those who are old enough to remember this TV series Dallas, we're not just going to find Bobby Ewing showering again. It's right.
No, we're not. I remember watching that. I was able to watch all those shows my mom, was watching. We're not going to find Bobby Ewing. He's dead, honey. Only in TV land do those things happen. Only in TV land. Yeah. Yes. I mean, speaking, of course, we have to speak about the Columbia Artist
Yes.
situation, Columbia Artist Management. For those who don't know, closed their doors last week to many unexpectedly, but to maybe to some people, it was not so surprising. But as another big international agency and an agent, like how does that affect the industry? And was it shocking to you?
It was shocking to me, absolutely. I had not expected this. And obviously, we all first of all we are a small and fragile ecosystem in this business, and we have to remember that anything that affects one part of the ecosystem affects the whole. And because we're a small group, and again, when when a major player for 90 years
Mm.
goes away that quickly, there's there is no joy in Mudville. It was devastating. Also because I started my career there, I have all of the vocal managers certainly are friends and dear colleagues,
Yes.
and many of the other managers in other divisions as well. And the history of that agency is unlike anything else in American history. It was the history of representation in America in many ways, along with other individuals like Saul Hurock. But it it really was a great shock to me. So no, and I wasn't hearing about it. There weren't mutterings and rumors and everything else. It was the night before. I started getting texts from a few colleagues saying, "Have you heard this?" And I had not, and I checked with a few trusted friends and found that it was true. It's devastating. I mean, I do think it probably is the harbinger for more moving away, as I said earlier, from the larger agency model. There are still other large agencies here with IMG, with Opus, with a number of the London agencies and so on that have a diverse set of holdings, as it were: conductors, instrumentalists, singers, attractions, touring, theatricals in some cases, whatever. I don't know. The economic model, frankly, has never been great, and I think that most people who are more knowledgeable about the business world than I would probably say it's always been something that teetered on the red anyway.
Right.
Overhead is enormous. The income is less, I think, than many people realize, and it's not. It is a tough business to make happen. It. I always said, and I don't mean to sound arcane about this, but I always said it was a gentle lady and gentleman's business. It was something you put on because, again, as we talked about earlier, you did it from passion. You did it from appreciation of what it was about. Sure, you can make a living. I'm not saying that you can't feed yourself. But at the same time, it's very much the economic model isn't great, and so I can imagine, especially because again, what I think this pandemic will do is people that were teetering on the cliff are going to fall off. As happened in a much less profound way in 2008 with the economic downturn that year. There will be attrition. There is no way that it won't happen. We see it in every other part of the world already. We're seeing it. We New Yorkers are seeing it in restaurants, for instance, in retail, in all these other things. We're not going to be immune from it.
Right.
It will happen, but it's very sad. It's sad to see it go so quickly. It's sad to see a true giant industry in the history of this business go away so quickly, and something that was built, by Arthur Judson, by Ronald Wilford, and many of the other current managers or recently departed managers. And I think that the individuals will largely be fine. I think a number of boutiques will grow out of this and so on.
Right.
The artists, again, as there are fewer management options in the world, I'm not sure that's ever a good thing. People always say to me, "Oh, you don't want more competition." I said, "It's not competition. We all have work to do.
Yeah.
We all have a job to do. None of us, those of us who have been doing it for a while, already are maxed out. We already have too many clients and are running all over the place and trying to keep up as best we can. But there's never enough time in the day."
Yeah.
So, I mean, in optimal times, obviously things in the present moment are a little bit skewed, but
Of course, yeah. And Nicole Heaston said, and so many singers and agents without a home, Yeah, I mean, already a lot of singers who are not managed. It's just such a small percentage. in the grand scheme that are of artists that have representation, you know, particularly artists of color. I mean, come on, you know, that's a whole, like I said, it's a whole other conversation. But yeah,
but it's actually incredibly relevant to what you asked me before about having people in my profession anyway, who are people having people of color in my profession. It's of the utmost importance because whatever subtle underpinnings there may be, having somebody of color in the business will change things. I know that. I absolutely know that.
Yeah, I said that. I said that to I don't know if I said it publicly because you know sometimes I do say things, and I'm like, shit, I'm not gonna have a career after this is over if I keep talking.
me either, but hey,
you know, right? But again, if I don't tell the truth, if I don't try to help in my way, you know, then we're not doing the work. But I said, you know, why are you also some people who have been able to get signed at Columbia? Why are you also sad? I said, some of you need to start your own agency. Some of you need to get out there and say, you know, call Matthew or email you and say, you know, listen, how can I be mentored by you? Like, get in there and see if you can get it done.
Absolutely, and this is the moment. This is a very, very good moment. I mean, the only other thing I would say is that many managers do come from singing. Many managers, including my own colleagues and so on, have come from singing careers. It wasn't my path. It wasn't my two mentors' path. But in any case, many do. But it's not something to start when you're 60 or 65. It's not a retirement gig. I've got to just tell you that straight out.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah,
it's too hard. It's too demanding. Whether that be the travel, the sheer intensity of it, the texts at 4 in the morning, whatever, which I don't answer because I sleep. But in any case, that it is not a retirement gig. It is something to do when you're in your prime, when you have the energy to do it, because it takes an enormous amount of energy. It really does, and it's not something to do when you think maybe something else would work. So,
right.
But we have had many distinguished managers who have come from being singers themselves, and this is an extraordinary moment.
Yes, absolutely.
As I said, we had this little pandemic to deal with first, but I hope that when the clouds when the clouds finally disperse, I hope that
things open up.
We'll make it our business to do that. I mean, we'll make it our business too, because it's a necessity. If you and so many of your colleagues have said in so many interviews and panels, if you don't have a seat at the table, things won't change.
No, it won't. And how do you feel about that? Listen, you've been in the industry many years and you've seen the change. You probably may have been in rooms where you were like, I can't even believe this conversation is happening. Like, how do you feel? And what do you say to those of us that are,
Well, a lot. I mean, there are myriad things to say in that regard. But first of all, it has to change, and it has to change now. It can't be something that we sort of think about for 3 years from now, because that sort of gradual change, I will say honestly, Karen, has already been happening. The slow kind of, if I may, and I apologize if anybody takes umbrage with this, but the tokenistic kind of, we need a black artist in this cast, we need an Asian artist in that cast. That has already been happening. That didn't happen when George Floyd was murdered. That has already been making its way. And I do think that there is a great, I want to be very, very respectful of my presenter colleagues. I think there's a great deal of sincerity, of wanting change, and of knowing that the change is necessary. But it's a question of how to make that happen. And I think that it's time, it's not time to sit by and wait. It's time to knock down the doors, because this has to happen now. It's been talked about and done in gradual degrees for a long time. For instance, one of the things you and I were discussing by phone a few weeks ago was that I feel that the idea of having black star artists has already been happening for over half a century. This isn't something, when you have a superlative, a Leontine Price, or Jesse Norman, or myriad others that I could name, it's not as difficult because the standard is so ridiculously high that that bar is so high. But if the bar is just, I don't know, an inch lower, that is where I think the critical mass occurs, because this is where to have a star singer is not the only thing. To employ 5 or 6 people right now, and say, oh, well, we want so and so, we want so and so. That is actually nurturing an old, an arcane system that I think is going to continue to go away. So we're talking about all these different trends that are going to occur. The star system has been waning for a long time. It's not the same that we had this constellation of, say, 1960, 65, whatever, where there were abundant major names. We don't have that anymore. We have a very few names that people are trying to squeeze desperately for every bit of content that they can give, and they only have 24 hours in their day too.
Right.
So basically, I think that this is trying to prop up a star system that is going to wane. It is waning. It's not going to be here much longer, and in that, I think that really emphasizing different things and different. I mean, I'm not saying people aren't going to want to see Bohème. Of course, they're going to want to.
Of course.
That said, having artists at every level where it's not just placing a person in each cast or a person in one opera or casting Porgy and Bess. It's a question of really having this in a systemic way so that it's not thought about anymore, so that it is de rigueur, and it's so that it is automatic. And that's where we haven't gotten, where it doesn't have to be one of 5 or 6 major name singers.
Right.
That there are lots of singers at every level, whether that's a comprimario level, whether that is major principal level, and everywhere in between. It shouldn't have to be thought of.
Right. It shouldn't be this like fat middle, fat bottom, and then this like little bit away. This
That's exactly
who break through, and it's just all this like.
Yeah, that's right.
Real estate in the middle, and people die. That's where I always say that's where your potential just dies when you're stuck in that space, and it's just the ecosystem. It's got to change.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we got some people sending you love. Brian Ziegler, Peter Ransman, Josh Winograde, Nicole Heaston, Brad Moore. Yes, Alex Fletcher. Yes,
we're getting this right.
Well, they're loving you. They're loving you, baby. They're loving you. No, but talk about your why. Because oftentimes, it's like I say, the agents live behind the phone. They live behind the screen. So I want you to talk about your why you do it when it's not, perfect. When it's not perfect, you know what I mean? Like why? What's your why?
Because I'm addicted. I'm absolutely addicted. I've been addicted since I was a teenager, and the addiction has never stopped. And I'm still addicted to the art form. People always say to me, "Oh God, you must want to listen to any more opera or recital music." I said, "Of course I do. Music never did anything but make me happy. It's the people around it that don't make me happy all the time."
Amen. Hallelujah.
The music never did anything wrong to me at all, unless it was sung out of tune or something. But I mean, that's the why is the music. Of course, it's the art. It's absolutely. And sure, that like every other profession on the earth comes with flawed people and difficult people and blah blah blah, and so on. But oh no, it's absolutely that credo is entirely clear to me. It's always been the art form, and that's the funny thing now, because that joy at the end of the day, the emails, the calls, the negotiations, the releases, all the things that we do every day in en masse. The joy of the day was going to the opera, going to the concert, going to the recital. That part is now not there. Mm-hmm. So it's just all the other noise that's going on, and that's not as much fun. I mean, my colleagues may feel otherwise, but I miss that. That's the reward. That's the fun part at the end of the day. Because unlike so many other professions, I get to be part of something utterly, absolutely beautiful at the end of most of my days, and or maybe a matinee. But I mean, that's a huge part of my life. Is this extraordinary beauty, this extraordinary gift of this art form, and that without that, you're right. It can be a bit of a slog, and there are those days that are certainly well less than perfect. But we're just going to, we have to, go through the tunnel to find the light on the other side. Yeah. And that's just the way it's going to be. We all wish desperately we knew when this was going to abate, when we knew when we could be ourselves in some form again. But but no, the why is crystal clear to me.
Yeah, that's why you've had so much success for so long, because it has to be clear, right?
Really, I'm really, really blessed and lucky. I know. I've known it all my life, but I have been able to have passions because I also have parents who always permitted me to indulge in those passions and not have to be any cookie cutter, anything else. I was allowed to be me, warts and all, and to have these great. And I'm lucky to have these passions. You know, I mean, every city that I go to, you can pretty much guarantee if I'm not around the music world, I'm in a museum, I'm in a gallery, because visual art is my, I thought was going to be my profession. It's my hobby, and I'm obsessed with it. I can't find out enough about it. I can't see enough of it.
Yes, I know people think I'm crazy because I go to the theater all the time when I'm not working. I'm like, not only do I get to see my friends, but I'm like, I love. This is probably why I probably want to go into administration, because, like, I mean, I'm probably out of my mind. Some people would say, but I mean, to sit in a theater, in a dark theater, and watch.
That's why I wanted to talk to you about it, because I knew you had that. I remember seeing you. We just were texting about it at Sky on Swings, you know, and how much you loved that piece, and how much, and you spoke about it with Marietta the other day, and I mean, it's you know how wonderful that experience was, and how deeply relevant that piece is. You know, I've had it, Alzheimer's in my family. I know the pain that is, and Flicka had it in her family.
Oh yeah.
You know, which it was incredibly poignant, and that's, you know, that sort of relevance. You know, again, that's why we do it. That's why we whatever part of it, you as performers, us as managers, whatever. That's why we do it.
That's why we do it. I mean, I can imagine it within it's always been in my life, opera. Always been in my life. I can't imagine it being out of my life. That's the reason why I don't think I wanted to teach full time, because then I wouldn't experience it in the way that moved me and brought me to it in the first place, which was being in the theater, seeing someone like Denise Grace when I was 15. And I'm like, oh yeah, that thing I want to be a part of forever.
Absolutely. No, I can't imagine not being around it. That's when people ask me, don't let the gray hair fool you. I'm around for quite a while yet. But I mean, people say to me, what will you do when you retire? I said, retire? Oh my God, please. I certainly don't want to think of that in the beginning of my 50s. My God.
Right. Like, what are you talking about?
I'd like to actually, you know, I feel like I finally know something after trying to for these decades. You know, I'd like to actually enjoy it for a little while.
I hear you. What are some of your other passions, Matthew? Like, tell the audience, like, who you are.
Well, I mean, I will say as I said before, I'm an obsessive about you know, about this art, and I listen to a ton of, you know, I'm one of these nerds who you know, who's got thousands of recordings, and I'm always looking for new ones. And yes, I still buy CDs. I know that will really paint me as being 90 years old, but you know, I am deeply involved in that, and the visual arts. I have to say, I read a lot about that. I go a lot to Italy, which is what I studied in 16th and 17th century Italy, were what I was studying, and so that's a huge passion of mine. I read a lot. I'm very interested in politics and the Supreme Court, and I read a lot of, you know, as I can, literature and everything else. Languages interest me enormously. And then, God forbid, during the pandemic, I've been running and I've been cooking, which are two things I would have never thought I would do ever in my life.
Oh, wow. So what's your meal that you're like, I'm bomb at that. Nobody can touch me.
No, my other half is vegetarian, so it's mostly vegetarian things, and of a wide variety of every nationality and so on and so forth. I don't think I'm really capable of having a signature dish yet, but I actually kind of like it. Probably shouldn't admit that in public, but
yeah, you shouldn't, because you're going to get some calls and some text messages saying we're coming over.
We'll see until I poison the first person, and then so we have our Lucrezia Borgia moment, you know.
They asked for it, so. Listen, the singer will remain nameless. I got food poisoning eating their food many years ago, but I'll tell you offline. Oh, that's so hilarious. Oh my goodness.
Travel has been hard not to do. Travel has been really really hard. Not for just the reasons everyone, again, you said earlier, people perceive our lives as glamorous. It's not just because, oh, darling, I miss my cafes on the, you know, it's I've been used to that since I was a teenager, and seeing other places and experiencing other things to me is the most fundamental part of engaging with other culture, because that's part of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And engaging with other people, other places. The history is my biggest buff thing as a broad category, and I find it inexhaustible in the most wonderful, engaging way. There will never be enough time in my life to learn all the things I want to learn. I just, you know, I will never ever have enough time.
Yes, that's what my dad always says. Dawn, I don't want to hear that you're bored. There's too much to do and too many places to go and to see for you to be bored. You know?
Well, and the good fortune that we have to be able to do what we do in many places, in glorious cities and glorious places.
Uh-huh.
We have to, again, reflect on that too. Among all the difficult things we have to reflect upon now, I think it's really vitally important. You know, and I still sing in a church choir, which I have to at least say, not because anyone needs to ever hear me sing, but because I love being a musician, and I really. That tiny little bit of music making is, to me, the most important thing. It's the people from that group are the dearest people in my life, and you know, it's that much music making. Just a little bit really is such a thrill, and I miss that terribly.
Yeah,
because obviously choral singing is also not going to work in the present.
Yeah, it will be a while before we go back to that. Yeah. Yeah, Josh Renegade is being bad. He told me to DM him later, and he'll tell me everything that you didn't tell me. What's the tea, baby? What's the tea?
Oh, Renegade.
He is bad.
Thank God.
Yes, exactly.
We all revel in that. But don't we got a lot of few tea bags in this side of things.
We sure do. Well, yeah, I'm sure we might start telling your business, Joshua Winograde. All the way out in LA.
Right.
Yeah, we're gonna take a sip on that one.
Yes,
yeah.
Here's to you, Mr. Winograde.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. I want to ask you so many more questions. Yes. Let's see if the kids have questions. Sometimes they have questions and they're like, you didn't answer my question.
Maybe why doesn't he shut up?
No. Yes, Marcus Beam. I love this. Hey, Marcus. And yes, Marcus is going to San Francisco. That's so amazing.
Wonderful news for him. Sad for us because he's a great manager and a great colleague, and I will miss him, but I know that your successors in Maryland and Adler's will be really well served by him. He's going to be marvelous in that job, and Carrie Ann as well will be a wonderful mentor. They're very fortunate to have him.
Yes, Matthew, Marcus and I were in Maryland together, so we go back. Brad Moore. Oh yes, tell about my teabagging this business. Oh, make him talk about Maryland. Oh, he's a mess, Brad. Oh, I want you to talk about some of the most outrageous experiences, some of those performances. I want to hear about those.
Oh God! I mean, you mean funny ones or great ones, or I mean?
I want both. I want funny, great, and crazy.
No. Oh God. I mean, great. There have been a whole lot. I mean, there really have. I would be wanted to select only a few of them, but I mean, the first performance I saw at the Met, I will never forget. It was my favorite opera, which is Don Carlo, and it was the all cancellation cast. It was Margaret Price, Tatiana Troyanos, Neil Chekhov, Bianca Feichel, Ruggero Raimondi, and I thought surely one of them, and James Levine, and I thought surely somebody wouldn't show up, and they all showed up, and you know, again, maybe seen through rose-colored glasses now. It's over 30 years ago, but at least that will always stick with me. I remember, oh God, you don't want to get me started on this because I really won't shut up. I remember in summer of '92 a production of Wozzeck by the great Patrick Chéreau at the Châtelet in Paris with Franz Grunheber and Hartwig Meyer and an extraordinary and Daniel Barenboim conducting an extraordinary performance that again I I barely knew what I knew what it was. I listened to it in music history class, but I couldn't believe how powerful it was. It was just some of the most extraordinary time I ever spent in theater. Leonie Rieseneck and Gabriela Baniachkova and Janova at the Met never screamed louder or made more noise in my life, because that was what Leonie Rieseneck did in the theater, and that was overwhelming. That I got to see some of those great artists, admittedly at the tail end, not like so many of my illustrious colleagues who were around for the heyday in the 60s and 70s. I wasn't around for that, but that I got to see some of these great people at the end. To have seen Luciano Pavarotti so much, that was an enormous privilege. So many. Crazy. I do remember a particularly abysmal Tosca at the Met one evening that was some. I'm sure many people here remember that there was sort of the cover cast, and you had that sort of off night. We don't really have those too much anymore, but this was the covers, and it was just hideous. And this was the night, she's no longer with us, I can speak about it. It was Janice Martin singing Tosca, and it was the night that she took some terrible fall and came limping out the stage door. And then the next night, because I was an addict, I went back to see it, even though I thought it was terrible. And she stabbed herself on the ramparts and just went like this and didn't do the jump, even though it was a huge part of the Zeffirelli production, because she had injured herself in one of her films.
No jump?
No jump. Not even an attempt at it, just sort of,
Oh. She said, I'm still going to get my check. At this point, I'm still getting my check.
Well, I think there was an element of that, to be perfectly honest, yes.
I remember the first time I did Tosca and Bernard Uzan was directing, and I couldn't do the jump. I couldn't in rehearsal. I was so afraid. I was crying, and I never cry. I'm not weak sauce like that. Like, oh, whatever. And he said, okay, well, go sit down. We'll do it tomorrow. Next day, I was like, oh, I can't. Go sit down, Go sit down. I could not. The third day, I had to do it. And I was like, oh, shaking and crying, because I think the thought of like killing myself overcame the fact that I'm actually acting, doing this job. And so, yeah, so I did. I was a little wimpy, but I did it, and I cried after. But it felt good, and I kept wanting to do it after that.
I mean, another amazing sort of set of circumstances I can remember was in January of '96 with Macropolis at the Met, which had never been done at the Met before and was done in English the first time. And at the first performance, of course, was the performance where Richard Versailles died on stage, and I will never forget, and that not for a happy reason, but I will never forget, because he was up on a ladder and had a massive heart attack and died, and came crashing down, and the thud that his body made. Oh my God! I still have to sort of. It was really, many people, in fact, many more people than the old Met could ever hold, said that they were there when Leonard Warren died on stage.
Right. Wow.
The capacity of the old Met, but in any case, no, I was there for that. And then the second performance of Macropolis was canceled because of a blizzard, which was at that point, almost unprecedented, I think, except for the death of President Kennedy, and the Met had ever done that. So it was a very ill-fated production that eventually became a wonderful production as well. But I remember doing that production so sensationally, and Carita Matila later, and so many. I mean, endless blah blah. I can do that opera queen thing forever. But yeah, some amazing things.
Who were some of your favorite singers of the past?
Oh boy. Now I really have to say. I mean, since we started talking about Rosa Ponselle probably is number one for me. That's just a voice that I have found so arresting and so amazing since I first heard it. Oh my God, so many. Anita Cerqueti, Leontine Price, Shirley Brett, Tito Galbi, Ettore Bastianini, Lucy Björling, Victoria de Los Angeles, Pilar Lorengar. Just endless. I'm going to miss so many that,
of course.
Petre Siepi, Nikolai Gyaulov, Mirella Freni, Renata Scotto, Maria Callas.
Of course.
And
I mean, your taste is terrible. You've got awful taste.
In equal degrees, and so I was never perhaps somebody that liked to niche people so much. I think I probably have more conventional tastes, but and also very Catholic taste. I mean, just across the board, there's no repertoire I don't like. I love Baroque repertoire. I've always been been a lover of that and learned so much of it from David Daniels, and now with others as well. With Jakob Orlinsky now, especially too, but I've always loved it. I remember hearing Messiah the first time in my local symphony orchestra and thinking that it was just the most amazing thing that I'd ever heard, and still the piece of music I know best in the world. There's really nothing that doesn't appeal to me if it's well done, and
yes, absolutely.
So I'm lucky in that regard too. I'm not pained. I'm always pained to go to bad performances, but.
Oh yeah, this is true. When you have to go backstage.
Whereas my casting director friends can sort of say, "Oh, I want to see this interesting director, this interesting singer, this interesting conductor." I'm like, "Oh, I have to go to the 99th Tosca revival that I really don't want to see." But that's where it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, that's why they're casting directors and you're an agent, right? Exactly.
Right. I mean, but I do. I mean, I go all the time to see things that I don't have clients in. I don't just follow clients. That's of course that's my work. But
right.
But no, I go all the time. I see as much as I possibly can every place that I am because it interests me. Sure, if I have no connection to it, I think it's terrible. I can leave after an act.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh no, I'm still addicted. Very much so.
Brad Moore said, "Did you see? Oh, did he see Marielle Devia?" They never. Yeah.
A couple of times. I saw her in Inferiornost Violet at the Met. I saw the Roberta Devereux, of course, the last one that she did in New York. Not a lot, because I mean, at least in first years, when I was really going intense at 10 performances a year. And Lucia at the Met. Lucia in the second iteration of the Zambello production. Yes, with Alfredo Kraus.
Whoa.
And so so a couple of times, not a lot though, unfortunately, because again, someone like Edita Gruberova, I saw exactly once.
Oh wow! Yeah.
Tiny at the Met, and that was it because again, I was very much New York based and didn't travel as much in those days, especially didn't travel for work, of course, and so I only saw her the one. Sorry, Lucrezia Borgia in Munich. But not much.
No, I saw her one time with Russell in Valencia, doing Norma.
Oh.
And I was sitting next to her partner, and I probably told this story on Convos before, and we both take out our phones to record, and Russell didn't know I was recording. And like, we were both looking at each other like we know we're not supposed to do it. But then we go backstage and we realize who each person belongs to, and it was all good after that. So.
No, if I can add one other thing to
sure.
Rewinding just slightly, because the other thing in terms of we're talking about casting and so on, the other thing where there's really a stigma and where I think we really need to clean out the racist cobwebs is in repertoire. Because there are certain pieces that have, excuse me if I'm being too base about this, but have been black.
No.
Ulrica, gypsies and exotic types and that sort of thing. Carmen, Ulrica, maybe Azucena, whatever. Rosencavalier, Britten, Mozart, Così fan tutte, things like this. These are the pieces that that really need, excuse me, again, I'm not saying this eloquently enough, but need to be integrated. And there is a particular stigma about particular repertoire. There is an idea in so many people's minds of what the Marschallin looks like, or what Dorabella looks like, or whatever. I mean, imagine, I have been thinking about a dream Peter Grimes with what you said, with Russell Thomas, Nicole Heaston, and with Reggie Smith. I mean, imagine what that gives, not only great singing, great expression, but what the greater dimension the piece takes on. And what and a kind of greater theater, because we see that piece always as very place specific and everything else. And of course, Crabbe and Britten both created something that was in its way very specific, but that specificity does not need to be reflected in who sings it on stage. And the breadth of that piece would be so expanded. And again, because I'm a multitasking nerd, and I love repertoire and so on. I really feel that we've been so constrained in what we've seen black artists doing. It's a nonsense. And
well, why is that? I mean, listen, I've auditioned for people and they say, well, we only see you in this, we don't see you in that. Or yes, like for me, I would love to sing the Rosenkavalier. And I think that should have been my entire career. I should have been able to sing all the Mozart, all the Strauss, you know, some of the Puccini roles. But again, I've been told, no, it's not for you. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And so like, how do we change that? You know, how does an agent who represents black artists, you know, deal with that?
You have to, I mean, you have to make a case. Obviously, you have first and foremost have to make a case for an artist somebody wants and say, hey, okay, you know, John Smith will come to sing this, but we really want this. And it's really, this is the thing. If somebody, again, going back to those 5 or 6 name artists, mm-hmm. you know, say, okay, this person gets to sing role X in every theater or many theaters. What she or he really wants to do is this role, and that's the way to really make it happen. But it has to be a persuasive sell. You know, you have to have the rapport and the ability to say, because again, it's a question of really pushing the door down. It's not a question of knocking politely anymore. You know, it really has to be that much, I think, because it can't, you can't just conform to easy stereotypes. No one can. No artist should. No artist of any sort should. But especially now, this is a moment where this growth must happen, and that must happen in terms of repertoire as well. I'm sorry I didn't make that point before when you were.
No, I want you to talk. I want you to talk. I want you to talk about that. That's why, you know, these are the conversations that we have. You know, that we need to have.
And I've been listening and learning a great deal, because there is a lot to learn, and to learn more and to grow more and to realize one's own limitations.
But how does an administrator change? How does, like, you know, I know there was one in particular, big house that I sang for. I did a very, very fine Serena in that house, and it was not the Metropolitan Opera, but I did that one too, and was told that I was not allowed to come back to that theater in any other thing besides Porgy and Bess, although I'm singing in other places. Like, I sing other roles on places. How do you get these administrators to change their minds?
Well, it's a process, and however, also the earth underneath them has shifted, and the place, the cachet, if I may be so bold, has changed immediately, because finally I think the world is realizing that it can't just be one person in one place or something else. It has to be, and of course also that's part of, you know, one of the things in the sales business is making sure you're making the right sale, and not trying to, the idea of, and my poor colleagues, if they're listening, probably are so sick of hearing this, but the idea of just going in and blanketing, oh, you have to hire so-and-so, but we don't have repertoire for so-and-so. Well, you should hire them anyway. That doesn't work. You have to find the right moment, the right thing to bring to somebody and say, hey, I know you may not have thought of Mary Smith in this role before, but this is really something that is important, you know. And I will say, you know, for instance, I had a theater ask me the other day, you know, do you know a good African-American Ellen Orford? And I thought, hallelujah.
Yes.
This is probably this, and not just for Azucena, not just for Carmen, not just for Dalila, whatever.
Yes, the standard.
Yes, well, but in a standard repertoire, but also a repertoire that, as I said, has had real stigma about it.
Yeah, exactly. There are specific roles. I mean,
that's what I mean.
The Aidas and the, you know, the price roles, of course, for sopranos, and for mezzos, it's the witches and the witches and bitches.
Witches and boys, yes, right. And boys.
Exactly. Well, yeah. I mean, there is a systemic change that has to happen, and everyone keeps saying, well, you know, with all of us getting advisory positions and all of us being, you know, some of us who are already at a certain, you know, level being tapped to be in these positions, which of course we will bring people along with us. But again, it can't just be a moment. It has to be an actual movement and a real change, and people have to change their hearts. They have to admit that they've kept people out, and then do the right thing.
That's right. And maybe some people need to depart then. You maybe a few people who really can't see beyond their biases need to go.
Yes. I'm all for that. Let me drink on that one. I'm all for
Mm-hmm.
that. Bye. Mm. It's very, very true. It's very true.
I mean, that is what has been necessary in many places, and it will only change when those in decision making positions change, or are able to do what they wanted to do. I don't again want to paint with a broad brush and say that this is somehow that it's a failing of people in those positions. I think, however, there is more to be done, and listen, I've learned a lot in the last months about from all of you, listening to your conversations, listening to so many interviews, panels. I've learned how much I didn't know.
What was your biggest takeaway?
That I have a lot to learn, and that even for somebody who considers myself knowledgeable, there's a lot of may I just use an art historical analogy? There was a seminal article by a great legendary professor from my graduate alma mater, the Institute of Fine Arts, named Linda Nochlin, called "Why Are There No Great Female Artists?" And this article is almost 50 years old now. And the idea basically was that the structures around the teaching of art, including the education of artists, women artists, and everything else, was part of the problem. What we were all taught was good and canonical, and everything else was, this much of the picture. And it was white, it was straight, it was male, it was Western, it was all those things, And so that has been my biggest takeaway in my own business that I thought I knew pretty well, was that these structures exist in so many ways and are exclusionary in so many ways that it's there is an enormous amount, and the reform, the cleansing, the change has to occur from a level that is, I think, probably even people in their teams. I don't mean just supporters and people advocating and doing the things that are happening in the world now, but also, with singers, especially. I can't speak well to the instrumental world or other things, but with singers, I think it begins, in high school, when people's voices are really starting to develop a bit, and finding it from that level up, because if you're not getting to the right universities, if you're not getting to the right conservatories, it's already stymied by that point. So suddenly you hear somebody, in a church or something, who's 48 years old, and you think, my God, what a voice! But never had the opportunity to be heard or trained or whatever. That sort of that level is where I think the change needs to begin. It needs to begin in high schools, in churches, in performing arts high schools, which are wonderful feeders of great talent in this country. In churches, if that's the relevant place, and whatever, it needs to be much earlier and profound. It's for me, this is the imperative. It's not just a question of hearing somebody at the master's level, the young artist program level. That already means that they have been through any number of filtration processes, and so that they may, we may. I always fear we're not hearing the people we should, and that may be people who aren't ready, so-called ready, but finding people that can be guided at an even younger age, sent to the right teacher, to the right coaches, to the right whatever, because the natural voices you do hear a lot of people have great voices, but where they're going to go,
you don't know that age between like 18 when I first was singing to 25 is it's just like gone.
The most critical, because thereafter you've been in the system and things start, I think, to go wrong. And when you hear somebody 22, 23, 21, even whatever, super young, as when I first heard you hear people before, in a sense, they've been futzed with too much, and sometimes also for the better, I might add. It's not always a negative thing, but when people, by the time 27, 28 creeps are, they have a wobble, they sing out of tune, they don't know how to breathe, whatever, and then it's a real problem. But No, it's critical to start very, very young and to offer as many opportunities from the outset so that people can hear you and mentor you, and mentoring and people that can help at that age, you know, it's critical. It's critical.
Yeah, it is critical. This is why I don't always think the young artists program is for everybody. And I think that we need to stop
Correct.
promoting that as the only
As,
path.
it never should be, and many great artists, including many great American artists, didn't do that. So it's not, sure, it can work very well for some people. I'm not here to diss it, because I've certainly been very much around that world, and very, very close to many of the people that run those programs. But at the same time, you're right, it isn't for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we need to
But
stop making everybody go through that system in order to get the pipeline. It should not just be one pipeline.
that's right. That's exactly
You
right.
know? Yeah.
But having exposure and getting people heard, you know, is really important. And
Exactly. It's true.
because enough, you and I talked about the thing that I found out from a colleague, of the minuscule percentage of African American artists that actually were even heard by one of the very leading people in our country, who has a database of so many singers for so many years, and the number of African Americans was minuscule.
Yeah.
What's wrong here? What's wrong here?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a 911 situation.
Yeah,
I've been fortunate. I'm
yes,
one of the fortunate ones in that way. But I mean, I know people who definitely deserve the opportunity, but they're not in the pipeline in the system. And and I hope to change that. Through my position is to offer people the opportunity to that I know can rise to the occasion, but
right,
just need a platform, need
right.
a place to do it,
I mean,
or to try things out.
if the opportunity doesn't go well, then that's a different discussion.
Yes, exactly. Then you have to find out why. And that's why you try to equip people with as much success as you can and the tools and everything. But
Exactly right.
yeah. What's the future? What is the future? Like, let's say COVID is done, and for you, ideally,
Oh, the ultimate future is to give tours of Rome, and and probably to live in Italy at some point, but that's not anytime soon. Um, but more of that, more Europe, more art, more architecture. But I don't not want to do this. It would be really simple if I didn't want to do this, you know. But the future for our business, I think the business will be smaller. I think it will be more festival like. I think it will. I really do think it will be more diverse. I think that I think that it will be more inclusive. I do think that there will be a lot more repertoire, both older repertoire and and commissions and everything else. Remember that most of the opera world, until really about the Second World War, was predicated on new works. Even in the early 20th century, when we don't think about it, or works that have been largely forgotten, but most artists, all these legendary artists we think of from the past, we think of Magda Oliveira, or someone
yeah,
like this. She sang what were contemporary works.
yes,
We got away from this, especially with dodecaphonic music in the post World War world. You burned the opera houses, all this, blah blah. But I think now there are a lot of composers that are creating amazingly interesting work. Think of the Met, between the Met's premiere of in 1966, I think, of Morning Comes Electra, until 91, they didn't premiere a work.
wow,
That
wow,
that period is really over. We have a vibrant scene of a lot going on, and I think there will be more. I hope there'll be more stories told that are varied and interesting and inclusive and everything else. So that's that part of it I'm enthusiastic about. I think I'm kind of hoping I might be completely out to lunch on this, that that there will be more recitals and more opportunities for people to express things individually and have the ownership of a program that she or he can create with a great pianist, and really render something that is very personal in that regard, that doesn't require all the trappings of the opera world. Uh,
yes.
I mean, I may be completely wrong on that. I don't know. The recital world has been in trouble for a long time, but it perhaps is a vain hope, but a hope nonetheless. Uh, and so my future, I'm as I said, I'm not going anywhere professionally, uh, but as far as the future of the business, Sure, we are probably going to constrict. I think there will be things that will be lost, and some of those will be pretty painful. You know, I'm not sure if Met will continue to do 26 offers a year. I don't know. I doubt
Yeah,
it. I doubt
we
it.
don't know.
I don't wish it. It's the last thing I wish for, but
Of course.
it may be true.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. The return of the recital, like Kenny said, and yeah, right about recital, and it's curating your own project, so every artist will be different. Every voice, every the art people will go and experience in the small spaces, maybe smaller audiences, and it'll get back to the intimacy. And maybe that's what we need. We need to go back to the core and then figure it out.
Remember too that artists like Barely, Marian Anderson, and so on did 50 or 60 recitals. Sometimes they did an astounding number of recitals.
Yes,
and the recital. Also the content of the recital was not Fauré group, Strauss group, whatever. It was there was a sort of miscellany of some. There were a few arias. I know that's taboo to certain people. There were arias. There may be
the purist
oratorio. It was a much different sort of thing. It was a little bit more popular. God forbid I should use the word, but that it was something that was really deeply. I think it was deeply appealing in those days. And the concert business then was thriving. It's not now, of course, but again, I think that part of it is the programming too. I think that making recitals a bit more. I hate to use the word accessible because again, that has a lot of pejorative slant, but I think making recitals relevant to people is really important, and of course relevant to the performer too. Can't render it if you don't believe in it. But at the same time, I think there's so much more that audiences can glean from a recital than simply having a very, very European style recital, which is a couple of groups, probably in the old days in your native language. Now we've steered away from that. We English speakers tend to be very apologetic about our own tradition. We don't necessarily want to do that. We think that the only way to be high art is to sing Mahler, Strauss, or Brahms, all of which I love and want as much as I possibly can. But at the same time, I'm not sure that that's always going to draw people in. It will help, but anyway, the recital programming is critical. So, and there's more to come on that front. That I promise.
Yes, absolutely. So you get kids, get your programs together, get your
It takes a lot of work. It's a ton of work, and you might not make much money from it. Let's just be real clear. It's not necessarily lucrative, especially if you're putting it on yourself and you're only but also we shouldn't really be doing recitals in 2,000 or 3,000 seat halls. I mean, sure, at Carnegie for a certain level of very famous person, sure. Okay, great, because that's how many people they can sell tickets to. But moving things into smaller venues, and finding the smaller venues that really are more reflective of what the recital art is about.
Absolutely. And Reggie Smith, you cannot sing Lizzo on your recital. How about that?
Oh, please, I'll go.
Okay, one song and that's it. Oh my goodness. Well, then I'm doing Beyonce Lemonade. Then the whole recital is Beyonce Lemonade. I'm gonna do a Strauss set, and then I'm gonna do Lemonade for the second half. How about that? Done and done. Oh my goodness, Brad. Relevant to the people. Exactly. It's the people. It's the people. It's all about the people. It's all about the community. Absolutely.
If you're not engaging your audience, you're really not doing the work. If the recital is only in your head and yourself, then that's not enough. You're as ever, Bradley. You're exactly right.
Absolutely. So what are some of the what is something you'd like to so many people on your side, agents who I'm friends with and been friends with, and administrators, that have gone to singing into administration, like what would you like to speak to them, because they do watch the show, they are a part of the Compost crew, they dip in and dip out, so what would you like to express to them?
Well, I think that we have to understand that if we're going to do something, we have to do something new. That if we're going to just continue to try to recreate everything that's been done for 50 years in the same way, we've already lost. That's already, I think, not going to happen anymore. It's not that, again, as I said earlier, it's not that people aren't going to come to Carmen or Bohème. they should, because they're intrinsically interesting. But we have to start something different, and it has to be a whole different approach to repertoire, audiences, to what we do. I mean, even in this pandemic time, the idea of trying to replicate the art form in 2 dimensions is nonsense. It doesn't really work. I'm very grateful that so many people have put out so much content. It's really beautiful. It's not so beautiful, but a lot of it, great. I love the effort. And so on. But at the same time, I think, again, trying to do something that isn't about what we knew from the past. It's about putting forth something that we really know is going to be very vastly different and probably terribly uncomfortable to a lot of us. And we're just going to have to kind of feel our way in the dark for a while until we find the light switch, because it is going to be really a difficult, unusual time where we don't know what's going to sell. We don't know what will be amalgamated as far as integrated, as far as video or 2-dimensional content. What will be, in live performance, what can be done. I mean, it might be a while till we have grand opera again. I don't know when we can put on Meistersinger and Aida and things like that. But what then do we do? And we have to also look to our European colleagues, who are, I think, making a really, really strong effort to get things on stage, even if they're in truncated form, whatever. We have to, again, find the pieces and the things that we need to do, because there is, as I said, apropos of the Linda Nochlin article, there's a whole lot of repertoire I don't know, and I've only been learning about a vast amount of repertoire I never knew, and I didn't know existed until the last few months. And
there are things sitting on some library shelf full of dust. That is a brilliant piece.
Yes.
So we got to go in, and when they let us back into the libraries, go in and dig. Whenever that happens.
But we can dig America here too. That's the thing. There is so much American music that isn't done, that for some reason was never thought to be quite enough, or European enough, or dodecaphonic enough, or whatever. Whatever. We should look at our own tradition and not be so damn ashamed of it. It's silly that we Americans apologize so much about this great tradition. Yes, it isn't ours intrinsically. Okay, so much of it was created in Europe, and the quantity will always be greater there because of
right.
But at the same time, the idea of simply saying it's all bad and it's all too lyrical or too tonal or whatever, it's crap. I'm sorry.
It is crap.
Because why are people buying it in the music theater and on Broadway, but we have to say it's terrible? I don't get it. So, I know. And obviously the demarcation between the two is something that's been debated by much greater minds than mine. But at the same time, why are we so apologetic? Why do we cling to so many things? Why are we always clinging to something else rather than trying to embrace it on our own soil, which I don't think we've fully ever done.
I know. We haven't. Jake Hagan and I've had that conversation before and about the critiques that he, gets or used to get. Now he's uber famous, but again, that why, if you have a beautiful melody and you're humming a tune, is it like, oh, that's, popcorn or cotton candy? Hell, people want us to hum tunes when they walk out of the theater and be moved by something beautiful.
What is every other tradition? Melody. I mean, people don't mind melody. It's okay.
It's okay.
I don't like boring theater any more than anyone else does, but at the same time, certain things really work, and
Yeah. Yes, Kazim, Agnes von Hofsch. Oh, yes. Is it Hohenstaufer? Yes.
Okay. Hohenstaufer. Yes. Please.
I had him dig out the aria for me in the library because I found it in my, because I'm so when it comes to repertoire too. And he found the music and sent it to me. What a stunning piece.
Yeah. There's a lot of that stuff too. I mean, for instance, Meyerbeer is being, interestingly given a new life in Europe, and this stuff was the bomb at one time.
Yeah.
Takes ridiculously good casts, but again, something like Deutsche Oper Berlin has done that, and and presented quite a number of the pieces. It presented L'Africaine, presented Les Huguenots, Ignora. I mean,
yeah,
gotta try. But it's equally in the past and the future. It's not simply finding and exhuming things from our archives either. I mean that more in terms of American repertoire, just because I feel so much of it is underplayed or never played. You know, how many people have done George Walker's Lilacs that won a Pulitzer Prize?
I know. I'll tell you about that after it's over. But yeah, but I know it's a full surprise.
With a brilliant text, Walt Whitman, you know, one of our most extraordinary authors. I mean, you know, where is it? And there's a lot more like that, you know.
A lot more, a lot. Go into those,
which I confess I really didn't know much about until these last months, because I finally got the kick in the ass that I needed. Excuse me. That to learn something else, you know, because I mean I like Agnesi von Hohenstaufen too, but and all the other nerdy nonsense, but at the same time, there's a lot of American repertoire I didn't know, but I'm learning some every day.
I love it. I love it. So what are some of the things what would you like to leave us artists, as I say, middle of the career artists, or anyway, young everyone loves young artists. I always say, you know, there's always plenty resources for young. But what about some of us that got some miles on us?
It's much easier to be a young artist, and I always say to artists who are in the career, say a decade or more, it's actually a much harder place to be unless you've been anointed one of the very, very few, because everyone thinks they know you. They think, oh, well, you sing these parts. You sing these 4 or 5 roles, and she's great in German but terrible in Italian. She's terrible in French but okay in Anglophone, whatever. That's the moment. The moment for entrepreneurial work is greater than ever, and it's actually necessary much more than it used to be. It's harder work than your colleagues or your teachers had, decades ago, because the opportunities are fewer. That's just a reality, and guess what? They're going to be fewer still after all this is over. At least for the proximate future. Farther future, who knows? Because someone has to pay for it. More than anything else, somebody has to pay for it, and that's the thing. Economic empowerment, without it, you just don't. It's all talk. It's all noise,
right?
And so on and so forth. That's where it has to begin, and we all know that, of course. But basically, I would say, this is the time to think about who you are, what you want to put out there, and even if that what you are is, hey, maybe this isn't for me anymore. Maybe it's really time to go, be a yoga instructor or whatever. That we got a lot of those right now. Whatever, whatever it is, I would say this is the moment to really focus on what you do best. And if that doing what you do best also may not be in core classical repertoire or singing full time or whatever, think about the other opportunities that I think people are going to embrace wholeheartedly right now. Especially if I may say to BIPOC artists, it's really, really a moment for growth and expansion and thinking outside the box. I know I was tired of that expression, but it really is a moment to think more broadly and to brainstorm with trusted people and everything else. If it isn't a performing career, what else is it? What else? Where can I make a contribution? Where is it that I can make, with this expertise, with this training, with everything else? What can I do? Because there will be differing opportunities, but I do think things will pivot. I don't think things are going to cease and desist. I don't think it's going to end. It's it's over 400 years old. We're okay, but there will be different things. But the ambition and the entrepreneurial impetus really is critical. If it's hey, my diary's open. Hey, I'm I sing really well. Book me. Going to be really tough. Really tough. And also flexibility, which is something I would say at any moment, even before the pandemic. Flexibility in order to build something that you believe in. If you believe in particular in the recital world and things like this, where the money will not be abundant, but the ideas kind of have relevance right now. Again, with all the political tumult and everything else we have in America, it is a moment for growth, because if you're, whatever you believe, and whatever it is you believe, go vote. But in any case, I don't care how I do care, but passionately. But if you're not voting, you're anathema to all of us. I'm sorry.
Right.
But in any case, it's really critical to have a vision for yourself and to know, to thine own self really be true, because it's so vital right now, because we need ideas. We need ideas more desperately, I think, than we've needed in a very long time. And the ideas mostly come from artists. I'm sorry if this will offend some people, but mostly they come from artists. The rest of us can help in the vision to realize them, and sometimes, some of us in the establishment, whatever that is, may say, I don't really think that's going to work. But at the same time, it's really a moment to get out there with ideas, because the world is going to need ideas, and we're not just going to return to the status quo ante. We're really going to have to really find a different way, and that creativity mostly comes from artists.
Exactly. So that means assert yourself. Be prepared with your ideas. Don't sit anymore.
Oh, it's prepare your ideas. Even if like any other thing, in brainstorming and in thinking out loud, certain things fall by the wayside, as they must. But that doesn't mean you don't air them.
Absolutely. You have the power.
Hope that one of those interesting ideas, you may have 20 that will land on good ground, as they say in scripture. I mean, so there you are.
There we are. Well, if no one else has questions, was it Michael? I think it was. Who was it? Michael said that we need our own podcast. I mean, listen, it's one of those ideas.
With you, Karen, anything. You just speak the word.
We could do 5. We could do 5. We could do a trial.
I'll never shut up. So.
No, I love it. We can debate. We can talk all kinds of stuff. I love it. Yes, Lexi Lobianco, who I love. I adore her.
Oh.
Yes. Stephanie Blythe is on here. Oh. She's fat. Her Kiki Conversations was legendary. Legendary. Yes, exactly. Wow. Kenny. Who else is on here? Y'all asked some questions here because Matthew just poured another glass, and so that means he's still ready.
That wasn't in order to torture people further.
Well, Nicole, Matt.
I'm very flattered by the presence of so many of your loyal followers, Karen, and really, that's a great honor and compliment. Thank you all. That's really wonderful.
Oh yeah, like I said, when I built this platform, I had no idea. I didn't even know I was building a damn platform, right? You know what I mean? I just kind of was talking and doing the thing that I always do, and I'm just so I feel humbled that during this time where we all need so much and connect, that it's been a really positive light in this time for my industry that I love so much.
Well, that's right, and the flow of ideas can never be a bad thing. And I really do thank you sincerely for bringing someone from my profession. I don't ever remember an interview with someone in my profession ever. Q&As, yes, and things like that. But I've never seen in opera news and British opera and the things that I read regularly. I've never seen a manager profile. Maybe Saul Hurok or somebody, Matthew Epstein.
Of course, yes.
But legendary people. But I think most of my colleagues would be very willing to do this sort of thing too. I think we have. We have a lot to say. We have an extraordinarily relevant position, but nobody knows what we do.
Absolutely.
And so I do think there's a lot of mystique and a lot of misapprehension about a lot of what we do and how we do it and everything else. And I think there's a lot to learn, because unfortunately there isn't an owner's manual for finding a manager. There's no way to you know how to operate your new car, your new mixer, but there's no owner's manual. And I think that it's the more that people, I'm always really happy to do Q&As and talks and everything else, because I do think that what I do is a mystery, even to established and known people. And so I thank you and for the breadth of having composers, librettists, pianists, singers, the whole thing. It's really, to me, it's a great service to our business. So.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Listen, I'm going to have more agents, and Dallas Opera just hired me for another show that I'm creating on their platform. So I'm very excited. And we will take, Kiki Conversations will be Kiki Conversations, but that other one will be much more journalistic and much more really getting to talk to the real change makers and gatekeepers in our industry. And so I'm very excited about that. So I'm going to have agents and all that kind of stuff on there, but I'm going to please come on. Listen, if these agents want to come on and talk to Kiki, I'm here for you, baby. Okay, we did have some questions. Yes, Matt. Can you ask Matthew about some of the Star is Born moments he has witnessed in his career?
Wow. I'm not sure if I've been at, I haven't been at something of the magnitude of February of '59 with Joan Sutherland and Lucia at Covent Garden. I would say, and I wasn't, again, the Don Giovanni for Netrebko at Salzburg, which is kind of one of the most recent ones. I wouldn't say I necessarily have been at those. I will say one that one because it's very dear to me, and I will completely implicate myself in this, was the opening of the new ring with Das Rheingold at the Met for opening night. And I've worked with Eric Owens now 23 years, and I was skeptical about Eric doing Alberic, and he knows that. It's not a secret.
Yeah.
I was skeptical at that time, but I also have a trust with Eric that has been built over many, many years. And Eric said, I can do this, and I okay. And he did it remarkably, and I'm not sure it was a Star is Born moment, but it certainly catapulted his career to a different place and a different repertoire that I necessarily had ever seen him in. It wasn't really part of my long-term vision, and that really, it floored me. I was so impressed and so of course moved by it and everything else, because it was a very different kind of singing than he had done there to that point. So that was, I'm not sure it was a star-making moment per se, but as with so many of these things, Star is Born kind of moments usually happen after about 5 or 6 years.
Yes.
Joan Sutherland debuted in 1951 at the Royal Opera House and didn't sing Lucia there until '59. She worked steadily there and did increasingly important roles, or on Netrebko, who debuted in '95 at the San Francisco Opera and had her big breakthrough 7 years later in Salzburg. Again, she wasn't unborn. It was just it's the popular perception of those things, I think.
Of course. Was it take 20 years to be an overnight success?
Exactly.
Right. That's a real thing. Yeah. Let me ask, what artist who wasn't a client have you gone to see live the most?
Oh, so many. I mean, Leonie Riesenig, Teresa Stratos, Gwyneth Jones. All the people that before my time in management, of course. So many. Hildegard Behrens. So Cecilia Bartoli. I've probably spent more performances seeing artists I didn't represent than the ones I did. I mean, again, because the largest number of performances I attended, certainly at the Met, was my first 6 years in New York, which was about 100 a year.
Wow.
Plus the recitals, the concerts, everything. I was mad, I actually go to maybe the same amount of opera, but in many more places now.
Yeah.
So, but I could say Cecilia Bartoli for sure is one of the great influences for me, and I was crazy for her at the beginning, and I remain so, and I take every opportunity I can to see her, and so many others. Really so many others, and it's not about the people I represent. Of course, I'm deeply proud of that. Of course, I am, but I want to see great singing and great expression. That's what I'm in this for. It's not just for clients. I'm thrilled thrilled and sometimes quite floored by the level of people that I work for, and constantly amazed and moved by them. But so many more that I'm probably something on right now. But
we'll save that for the podcast, honey.
Okay.
Yes. Miss Blythe, Stephanie said, Matthew, what makes you sit up and take notice as an audience member?
Well, two things. First of all, a timbre, a voice like Stephanie, yours, a voice that is so arresting, so majestic, something that just makes you completely so. They're making that sound, and this is acoustic singing, unbelievable. That will always always be something that just profoundly moves me. I will never be less than utterly floored by the power of the human voice, especially in singing. And therefore, you know, a great voice like that will always, you know, recently I was Lisa Davids, you know, I mean, just hearing that kind of old-fashioned, big, integrated, wonderful voice, I really have to, and this beautiful recital over the weekend for the Met, you know, it just thrills me. It's so thrilling to hear.
Yes.
Absolutely. And at the same time, profundity of expression. Going to Stephanie, I know because she was so deeply relevant to your career as well, Teresa Stratas. You know, hearing Teresa and knowing her rather well, certainly a mentor to me, and you know, the depth and that she went to in every portrayal, whether that was Componist, whether that was Mère Marie, sorry, excuse me, Mère Marie, listen to me, Madame Lidouane, or you know, or Liu, or whatever, or Marie Antoinette in Ghosts, extraordinarily divergent types and styles, with a depth that, you know, just moved me to the core, and every time. So it's both. I always think I'm a prima voce person, but I also have to tell you that expression, you know, giving everything, and of course, voices from the past. You know, it's so many, most of which I didn't hear, but you know, and Callas, you know, Callas, this sort of expression which is peerless, but also Moffo and Traviata, you know,
yes, of course,
identification, this stunningly feminine timbre, this, you know, something just amazing.
Exactly. I remember doing a masterclass with Anna Moffo, and she was like, "No, I was in them. I don't know if I sang for her or not." And she just kept talking about the woman's shoes. I was like, "Oh, Anna." Oh no, yeah. My funny Moffo story. I was getting an award in New York by some foundation or whatever, and she was the special guest artist, and Michael Eliason was there, and I was singing or whatever. And she forced me to sit in the back. She said, "Stay in the back and don't talk to anybody. You know, don't talk to anybody." So she made me stay in this back room in this closet until I was about to sing. But she taught me something. I thought she was absolutely out of her mind, this crazy woman. She's like, you know, but she taught me something about preparation, about protecting myself, about, you know, all of these things. So that's my great Moffo story, you know, with her deep voice back then. You know, by then, you know, get in the back and don't talk to anybody. You know, just stay back there until you have to come and sing. So, well, hello. We have a friend. Anyway. You'll never come to Kiki Combos. What are you doing here? Kitty cat. It's a kitty cat. Anyway, Matthew, thank you.
Thank you, Karen. This has been such fun. I hope that it's been valuable. And in any case, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you. Really, as I said, it was a beautiful surprise, and it's been all sorts of fun. And you and I will plan the future very soon. We
will, and we are going to do that podcast. So we're gonna give the industry that podcast. I adore you. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you,
everybody. We'll see you next Thursday. Bye.